Good morning. If the Metro North Committee could come to order, please. Are there any public speakers?
Good morning. We have 2 public speakers signed up. We ask them to adhere to the 2-minute time limit and to speak to agenda items. The first speaker is Omar Vera.
Good morning and Happy New Year. Welcome back to January edition of the MTA's Metro North Committee meeting. All right. I don't have really much to say, just mainly reiterate what I said in previous meetings, but with one new recommendation that see if the MTA could negotiate with Amtrak to start running trains from Albany and from Montreal to Grand Central Terminal. After all, like the cities, of course, are roughly no more than like 200 miles apart. But and also see if Amtrak could run like a faster, like if the MTA should recommend that Amtrak could have like a faster service to from Montreal and then Grand Central. That's all. And have a good day.
The final speaker signed in is Murray Bowden.
My name is Murray Bowden. I live in Hartsdale, New York. I'm partly responsible for the Amtrak Washington Railroad accident because I didn't take the time or I didn't have the skills to do something about it. I'm here to eventually, by the end of the day, make it clear that positive train control is a technology that doesn't work and will never work, and that what will be used eventually is some form of autonomous control. That's where your car stops by itself. I will prove that point with 2 issues. One, the red box at Roaring Brook, and the second, the yellow line at the Whitestone Bridge. You're all familiar with the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which recognizes that at times there will be changes required, and there is a procedure for effecting those changes. When someone wants to make a change, they apply with the change to the Federal Highway Administration for vetting and have it looked over for accuracy and see whether it is applicable to the United States and the general population. What some particular engineer or group of engineers feel that they think is good needs to be and is required to be vetted by the Federal Highway Administration. Metro North and their engineers and advisors failed to do that with the red box at Roaring Brook, which means that it does not meet the federal regulations. Now, you can cut me off or you can let me continue for another couple of minutes to set this up so that you know where this is going to go for the end of the day. I will be here for every meeting, and on Wednesday I will be here for both meetings. And if you stop at this point, I've set it up and I will continue at every meeting till this is done. I have contacted numerous people who write articles about this, and I find that positive train control is just not understood. They don't know what it is. This is for the same reason that you have not followed the rules in following up on the box in there.
Mr. Bowden, can you conclude your remarks, please?
One of the problems is that the gentleman over there who's keeping time has no idea what I'm talking about. He follows the rules as they're written, and he thinks nothing about the effect on a commuter. I'll stop because I have a lot more meetings to do. It was my original intention to make an issue of it at this point. There's too much work to do. I have to prove that positive train control is not valid, and I will do it today.
Thank you to our speakers. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes? They're in your book. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any changes to the work plan?
Yes, there are. We have based the work plan for 2018 on the work plan that we had presented for your approval in 2017 with one change. We had discussed that change in December. We are proposing to add PTC as a regular item to the committee reports. So beginning this month, the committee will see a PTC report in the book every month. And those months when the Long Island Committee and the Metro North Committee meet jointly, there will actually be a presentation at the committee on our progress towards implementing PTC by the December 31st, 2018 date. So with that change, the work plan is otherwise unchanged from 2017.
Thank you. I move to approve the work plan. Is there a second? Those in favor? Thank you. May we have your report, please?
Sure. Since we're on the topic of PTC, one of the things that we want to do over the course of the year is to continue to bring milestones of particular importance to the attention of the committee. One of those milestones was met over this weekend when we began to operate the M8 fleet on the New Haven line, including the New Canaan branch. With civil speed enforcement. Now, civil speed enforcement uses the existing signal system to enforce maximum speeds. It's one of the 4 markers of PTC, the prevention of overspeed derailments. We've had that functionality in place since shortly after the Spite and Dival derailment on critical curves and our movable bridges, but now we are implementing it across the entire territory. So we're starting, as of this weekend, with full civil speed enforcement on the New Haven line, including the New Canaan branch. It's an important milestone for us and a very important safety improvement for our customers, so we're very pleased about that and wanted to bring that to the attention of the committee.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to the team who's been working so hard in terms of delivering these milestones and delivering the project as well. In Portchester, wanted to bring to the committee's attention that after a couple of years, we have unveiled our ADA-compliant elevator on the outbound platform. This is a complement to an ADA ramp that's on the other platform. We will be having a ribbon cutting with the village this coming Thursday, but it's again another important amenity for our customers on the New Haven, and we're very pleased about this improvement. Just a brief word about customer complaints. They were up 7.7% from December. And overall, customer complaints were up 5% from 2016. More good news today, it's about ridership. We have preliminary ridership numbers for 2016. Our total annual rail ridership is projected to be 86.5 million, which is the largest in Metro North history. We're up approximately 300,000 rides from last year. So this is good news. These are preliminary numbers. We'll be giving our final report for 2017 in a couple months. East of Hudson ridership was approximately 84.9 million, another record. It surpasses our 2016 record by about 400,000 rides. It was a record-setting year for both the Harlem and the Hudson. The Harlem, excuse me, had 27.8 million rides, 27.8 million rides. The Hudson had 16.9 million annual rides. 400,000 more than last year on the Hudson and 200,000 more than last year on the Harlem. West of Hudson annual ridership was approximately 1.6 million, which is 3.6% below 2016. Connecting services, our ridership increased 7.5% on the rail link, but we're down on both of the ferries, 2.6% on the Haverstraw-Ossining ferry and 1.9% on the Newburgh Beacon ferry. Again, all of these results are preliminary. The full ridership results and analysis will be presented as part of the annual ridership report in April. We're going to talk a little bit about our operations in December and January. With the cold, we had a bit of a rocky start of the month in January. And with the slips, and Neil knows about that very well, having sat on a Hudson Line train for 2 hours a couple weeks ago. 3 hours? I'm sorry, 3 hours. But You plodded on. We appreciate that. It was a tough night. It was a tough night for everybody.
Look, I was very close to having the group figure out that I was in the MTA board. There were some very angry people. I kept it to myself as much as possible. And when one guy started looking at me because he heard me on the phone with you and Ronnie, I moved outside of the room.
Yeah, well, I know. The other thing, too, is there seemed to be an inordinate number of HQ senior staff on the train, so I was getting texts from just any number of people who were also stuck somewhere between Tarrytown and Croton that night. So it was a tough night.
We survived, and
Yeah.
I was the train crew. I don't remember the train number, obviously, but it's a lot of good announcements on board, and I think the folks on the train, my fellow riders, were not... What's that?
No, he had heat
we
and
had
lights.
heat, we
Yes,
had light.
everybody had heat. Everybody had heat and
There
lights.
was no singing. It was like we were all,
There was a lot of good fellowship, I imagine, because you were there long enough.
There was no revolt either, so.
Yeah. So John Kessich is going to talk a little bit about our December issues. We had a little bit of slip slide and some fleet availability issues in December, and then we had the cold in January. So John's going to give a bit of an overview.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Thank you for that warm-up. After a tough December that presented us with many weather-related challenges, I am pleased to report that for 2017, Metro North service operated above goal at 93.4% overall. At next month's joint committee meeting, we'll provide a full report on last year's operating results. For the month of December, as Kathy noted, service reliability was below goal at 89.8%. Most of the delays were minor, meaning they were in the 6 to 10 minute range. So with that, 95.7% of trains arrived within 10 minutes of schedule. For the month, on a line-by-line basis, the Hudson Line operated at 90.3, Harlem at 90.4, and the New Haven at 89.0. After an extended period of light drizzly rain on December 5th, coupled with the late season fall of leaves, we had extreme slippery rail conditions from early in the morning through the end of the day, which created a significant number of late trains and delays. This condition also caused damage to the train's wheels during braking and resulted in some of the cars being taken out of service for wheel truing during that week. And this caused a short-term reduction in the number of available rail cars during that first week in December. Our equipment maintenance forces were busy throughout the week and weekend to restore our fleet size to full strength. During this period, Metro North let customers know they should expect some shorter trains with the potential for crowded conditions and delays. Extra personnel were also deployed to the main floor of Grand Central Terminal to assist with customer information during that week. Adding to those issues during the first week, we had various infrastructure failures that challenged us through the month. In particular, we had 4 days where the failures hampered our operating flexibility and resulted in significant congestion, which resulted in delays. West of Hudson operated a little bit better than we did east of Hudson at 91.9% for the month of December. Pascack Valley operated at 93.3%, and Port Jervis at 89.2%.
Our weather was a little better.
Your weather was a little better, but unfortunately on the Pascack Valley, the fleet performance was a little bit lower due to some failure of New Jersey Transit locomotives. We also are still struggling with some engineer availability issues west of Hudson, and we had 9 canceled trains during the month of December. East of Hudson fleet availability struggled during the month, as I stated earlier, so our consensus compliance numbers for the month of December are 98.1%, and that coupled with the service disruptions caused us to be below goal for consensus compliance during the month of December. Our fleet mean distance between failures in November was also significantly below goal at 124,297 miles. But through the end of November, our year-to-date is still above goal. We did have a challenging December as well, so it's going to be questionable if we're going to make our 200,000-mile goal for 2017, but we'll be close. During November, what occurred is our EMU fleets, the M3s, the M7s, and the M8s, experienced a higher number of door, brake, and pantograph failures. And our maintenance of equipment department is actively reviewing the causes of those failures, and will generate a corrective action plan that they're implementing in 2018 to recover that performance. On to some challenges in the beginning of the year. First week of January, the snow with sustained high winds made it almost impossible for us to keep our switches clear. On Thursday, January 4th, when Winter Storm Grayson hit upon us. It's the first time I've ever heard the word bomb cyclone, but I guess if we stay here long enough, we'll hear all kinds of new terms. The most challenging conditions, as Kathy and Neil mentioned earlier, were on our Hudson line, where strong winds downed trees in the morning and caused multiple interlocking failures in the evening, especially in the vicinity of Croton Harmon Station, which backed up the railroad for about an hour and a half period until our MW forces could actually get there and do their best to try to shovel out the snow that kept being blown into the switches. And although all of our switches are equipped with electric switch heaters, with those extreme cold temperatures and the blowing wind, there really was no way for those heaters to keep up with the incoming snow. Several trains were delayed for over 2 hours, but customers were kept warm and informed. All of this time, our crews fought the conditions so that our customers could continue their journey safely. The storm occurred at the tail end of 13 consecutive days with single-digit below freezing temperatures. But when the weather was at its frigid worst, once again, our employees performed at their best, providing our customers with a safe and reliable service despite the long delays they incurred on that particular day. Also, when most people were home celebrating the holidays, but we did have some brave few that actually made it to Times Square for the ball drop with the single-digit temperatures that night. Our employees were also out there along the infrastructure, making sure that we were able to deliver safe and reliable service. I'm proud of the way Metro-North pulled together as a team to keep our coworkers, our customers, and our infrastructure safe during this challenging time. And with a little help from Mother Nature this past week, we're now back into the double digits, some warmer weather, and we're being able to recover our service in a consistent manner. Thank you.
Thank you both for your reports. I'm especially happy to hear about the civil speed enforcement. That's a real banner, which makes all of us happy because we definitely value the safety. Do you have any questions? Hearing none, would you introduce our VP for safety, system safety?
As part of that introduction, we also wanted to let the committee know that Justin has been recognized by Railway Age magazine as one of the 10 up-and-comers under 40 nationwide in the railroad industry. So Justin is going to be recognized in Chicago at a ceremony on March 13th. We were saying it would be nice if there were some awards for people over 50. They don't seem to do that anymore. So we have to I'm telling you. So we'll have to celebrate our youngsters here. So Justin is one of the top young railroad professionals. So we wanted to recognize him, and now he can give a safety report.
Thank you. All right, the safety report can be found on page 21. For the second consecutive month, there has been a reduction in both customer and employee injuries. The customer accident rate is 36% lower than the previous 12 months. The employee lost time injury rate is 3% lower than the previous 12 months. Grade crossing incidents, derailments, and collisions remain unchanged for this month's report. And finally, our community outreach program TRACS reached over 4,600 individuals in November, bringing the total for the year to nearly 71,000. This concludes the report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Yes.
It's great to see the broken gates have dropped 50% year to date. I know a few commissioners have asked questions about that over the past year. In the governor's proposed budget, there's a section that talks about video capabilities at railroad crossings and allowing the authorization of that at the municipal level in concert with the MTA. Is there any additional information that you can share with the committee about that? I know it was something that had been brought up in previous committee meetings.
So we have advocated this. We strongly feel that enforcement at grade crossings in concert with our municipal partners is a good thing. With our general counsel, we have tried a couple of times to get this through and are very hopeful that this will happen. And if it is in fact successful, we will do everything we can to partner with as many municipalities as are willing to do this.
Any additional questions? Yes?
Madam Chair, you went so fast to the, did you have any questions about Kathy's report? I did have one piece, so I don't know if we want to finish, Justin. I did have a question and we didn't get a chance to.
I think you should ask it.
Kathy, you mentioned a relatively high increase in customer complaints. Can you just give us some sense of the nature of those complaints?
You know, I'm going to have to get back to you on that in terms of the nature of the complaints. I think one of the things that we're seeing is because of the use of social media, we're seeing there are more vehicles for people to register complaints. We had seen this a couple of years ago as well, and then it kind of stabilized, and now over time we're seeing an uptick because, again, we have more vehicles for people to actually register their complaints. John?
If you just add to what Kathy stated, again, the complaints we get are currently at close to record low levels, so the 5 to 7% that Kathy mentioned is significant. But again, the complaints typically follow our late canceled and delayed trains. And in the months of November and December, our on-time performance was below our 93 that we promise our customers. So that uptick is directly related to our service delivery.
Anything else? In that case, Chief Moynihan?
Good morning. Well, system-wide for the month of December, the total major felonies are down by 2. That's 24 versus 26, or a decrease of 8%. Now, for the year of 2017, there were 271 major crimes versus 307. That's down 36%. I'm sorry, that's down 36 or 12%. Now, I'm very pleased to report this is the lowest amount of year-end crime recorded in the 20-year history of the MTA PD. Metro North for December experienced a reduction in major felonies of 25%. That's 12 versus 16, down 4. Year-to-date, Metro North saw 144 versus 166, down 22 or 13% in Metro North. I'm also pleased to announce that on January 10th, we swore in 37 new MTA police officers that joined our team. And for the hate crime report, in 2017, there were 29 versus 22 last year. That's an increase of 7 or 32%. All involved hate by graffiti. Our MTA detectives have aggressively investigated all of these crimes, working collaboratively with our law enforcement partners locally and statewide. That concludes my report.
Questions on the police report? Mr. Saul.
Chief, could you give an update on the situation on 125th Street as you see it? Thank you.
Absolutely. Since November 9th, we've actually had a presence there 24/7. Activity there has increased significantly. One of our focuses is quality of life and homeless conditions at 125th Street. Just for that period, I'd like to report that we've increased contacts and enforcement. If you look at 125th Street alone, we've had over 14,000 contacts. We've accepted, we've offered services to individuals, and it's been accepted 190 different times. So that's 190 times we've removed individuals and taken them to shelters. Summonses, we've issued 77 summonses there, and we've arrested 19 individuals at 125th Street. So 125th Street is certainly the focus for quality of life.
Chief, forgive me if maybe the hate crimes report has been here before. I feel like I haven't really looked at it in detail before. I'm drawn to the line about Semitic, which I assume is Jewish. Can you just help me out? There's a massive increase in a relatively striking number. Can you just give us a sense of the nature of these hate crimes?
It is an increase, and it is alarming. Every one of those involve graffiti, whether it's a swastika or a statement. The bulk of those incidents occurred in the beginning of the year, which we've talked about at previous meetings, which resulted in an arrest. But there are incidents that do happen throughout the system, and they're investigated. We're investigating a particularly concerning incident right now, and I don't want to get into the investigative, but we've got some definitely some good leads on that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief. Would you like to comment on the information items?
Sure. The first information item is Glenn Hayden's quarterly track report.
Thank you. So the books are closed on our production figures for 2017. In your book, beginning on page 30, you'll find a report. Our program tie replacement last year, we finished at 91% of our goal of 42,000. However, when you add in the ties that we put in with our rail vacs, we come right about to 100%. We hit almost exactly our planned 9.9 miles of welded rail replacement. Surfacing, we were over goal at 126%. That's a good thing for us. We have a new surfacing gang out there and some newly qualified foremen, so next year we should do even better. Switch renewal, we hit our goal, 37 switches. Crossings, we were slightly under. We had planned 17 and only did 12 renewals. That was because we refocused on some other strategic work. If you look at field welds, we put in over 2,200 field welds. As far as I can tell from when we've been keeping records, that's a record high for us. And this is very good because every joint that you take out, you reduce one maintenance spot. Our rail grinder, we were able to take advantage of some track efficiencies, and we were beat our goal. GCT station tracks, this report was completed early in January when we had not yet returned track 32 to service. It's now back, and we've taken 24 track out of service, so we're continuing with our program of renewals. And then when you get into our detector cars, Sperry, ENSCO geometry, we found defects, we replaced them. 2018 is a notable year for us. We should receive delivery of our very first, our own track geometry car. It's been a long time coming, and it will help us a lot. We will be able to do it, use it for our programmed detection as well as kind of quality control behind tracks that we put back into service. Bridge repairs, there's a long list here of the overhead repairs, which primarily were steel, bearings, and decking. Bridge timbers, we had a great year. We put over 2,000 bridge timbers in Connecticut. That was primarily because of work on two of our major movables, Coscob and Devon. And we are working very diligently to complete that program. We have one more track left on Devon. We have 2 tracks left on Coscob and 2 on Saga. We're continuing to work through those. The S program is a bunch of steel and masonry repairs in Connecticut. Those programs, as well as the railroad maintenance memorandums, are generated by CDOT's bridge inspection consultant. In the state of New York, we put in 171 timbers. We also replaced a couple of what they call rail top culverts. Direct fixation fasteners, we've done a lot of work down on the Park Avenue Viaduct and in Grand Central in certain spots, and we're approximately 30% complete on the Park Avenue Viaduct now. If you go to the New York Bridge repair, we did a lot of work on the lower New Haven and on the Port Jervis. And finally, Tomac and Sound Beach, those are two bridges that the state of Connecticut is replacing. We have to do a significant amount of support work, putting in ballast retainers so that when they take a bridge span out, we can still run trains on the adjacent track. We did a lot of graffiti removal and put in about 1 mile of right-of-way fence. We have a task force where we identify problematic areas with our security folks and our customer service folks and target the installation of right-of-way fence. The very last slide shows some pictures before and after of cleanup we did at Woodlawn, which is the junction of the Harlem and New Haven line. We are continuing our aggressive cleanup program. As a matter of fact, we're cleaning up tie stubs on the New Haven now between Norwalk and Southport. If you have any questions, thank you.
Questions? Moving on. Oh, yes, you have a question, Neil?
Just a brief one. You spent a lot of time on switch renewals this year, it looks like. Is there any way we can foot the, selfishly speaking, the switch problem for winter where the switches froze at Croton? Is there anything one can do when you do a renewal to actually make those a little more weather stringent?
Well, what we do is, as John said, all of our switches outside of Grand Central have switch heaters. That particular storm was the worst of the worst for us for switches. Very low temperatures, blowing wind, and the snow kept blowing back in. If you have a normal snow where it's kind of wet and packed down, it sort of stays where you put it. But we do have switch heaters on all of ours. One of the things we do around Thanksgiving is we go back and make sure that every switch we put in the previous year has snow melters on, they're functioning. We test all of our elements and change them.
Any other questions? PTC?
Yes, so as I indicated earlier, we have as an information item this month the PTC report, which is in the book for your information this month. The report was based upon the format that we presented to the Federal Railroad Administration. Glenn and Anthony Forsina, who's the executive director of PTC, and I have been called down to meet with the FRA about 2 weeks ago to give them an update on the status of our PTC implementation. I would like to inform the committee that we thought the meeting actually went quite well. They were very supportive and appreciative of the efforts that we have made to implement this very important technology. So the report essentially is based upon what we had presented to them, but we do view the report as a work in progress. So any comments that you have in terms of the format, any information that you would like to see that you are not seeing, please let us know, and we aims to please, so we want to make sure that you're getting the information that you need to be able to understand the progress that we're making and the challenges that we're experiencing in terms of implementing this project.
Comments? Questions? None? Yes?
Let me use this as the opportunity to just briefly talk about the PTC. I don't know if we're calling it a working group or a subcommittee, but whatever we're going to call that group, we had our first conversation on Wednesday, I believe. Myself, Sue, Mitch, and Larry Schwartz have sort of volunteered to be part of that group. All but Larry were able to join the conversation with Ronnie and Pat and Kathy and many others of the staff. So we appreciate your continued focus. And I think the three questions we had of this group here, from Mr. Merdler all the way up to Sue and on down, three things we want to bring additional attention to, or at least an opportunity for attention to, are threefold. One, what metrics do we want to track? And this both for Metro North and Long Island Railroad, and we can have a second conversation for those who additionally join the next discussion. But what metrics we want tracked? What mitigations do we want to discuss? Meaning financial, yelling, whatever it takes to work with our vendors and partners to make sure it happens? And third, what kind of transparency do we want to provide, not just with the materials that we see, but in some ways, in my opinion at least, more importantly, what do we share publicly? For example, I think, Kathy, we should be getting an enormous amount of attention for civil speed enforcement, whether the small part you're doing to New Canaan, as well as you roll that out, because I think that's called PTC 2. Am I correct understanding in the nomenclature of this document?
Yeah, I mean, that's how we've depicted it. That's not really a term of art or anything.
Well, I'm just saying, but you got the document. We might as well use the language you have here. We should be getting attention for those things because, to your point, if this had been in place, the chance of spine dival happening or anywhere else related to that would not have happened. So,
yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the objectives that we continue to want to act on is to reiterate the safety of the system and indicate to the committee and to the public at large the safety improvements that we're making along the way. And we view this, as I said, as a significant milestone because, the common understanding at PTC is that it prevents the type of derailments that unfortunately was just experienced in Washington State a couple of weeks back. The civil speed enforcement across our territory will prevent that type of derailment from occurring fully now 11 months before the PTC deadline. So, we're pleased to be able to report to the committee and the public on those safety improvements that we have put in place that will prevent against those types of very unfortunate accidents.
So I guess I'd ask my colleagues on behalf of myself, Sue and Mitch, what do you think we should be tracking? What do you think we should be communicating to the public, and how should we go over mitigations?
I think what Kathy just said is very important because the perception of some, as we discussed, is that until we get complete installation of PTC, the system is unsafe and we have nothing. We all know that is not true. Even before you finish civil speed control, there are a variety of safety measures on both railroads. This provides another layer of safety. PTC will provide another layer of safety. But getting that information out to the public is very, very important because, the assumption is, well, if you don't meet the December 31st date, therefore the system is now unsafe and will continue to be unsafe. And we know that's not true. So the more transparent, the more information we can provide about the current safety features as we move forward with installation of PTC on both entities is very important in that context. The other question is, while the report, and rightly so, amplifies numerical results. We got to put up 10 poles, we put up 5, therefore we're 50%. That's not completely true in that context. So the more explanation we can provide of the numbers, not just the numbers, is very important because it may have been that you put up the 5 most important poles and the 5 are not as important, or whatever the context is, but it can't be just a numerical explanation of, well, we're 50% because we put up 50% of the equipment. It's a lot more complicated than that, and that explanation, I think, is very important to get across.
Yeah, no, we completely agree with that. That's part of the reason why we wanted to put in the bullets that show month-by-month activities, because, some people are sort of numerical people and some people are word people, and I tend to be a word person, so I kind of like to see the language laid out in terms of what we want to hit every month. That's also the reason why we have in sort of language the 30-day look-ahead and the significant accomplishments so that we can sort of have in a narrative form, where we think that this is going and, some of the things that we expect to experience over the course of the next month. The one thing that I did want to point out, sort of apropos of your earlier point about how the system is already safe, is I know this committee knows about our EAP system, Metro North's EAP system, which is the Enhanced Employee Protection System. That's a system that we put into place beginning in, 2015? was after 2013? Okay, 2013, to protect our roadway workers. And that is something that the FRA has recognized already satisfies the PTC mandate. So we've got something in place for 4 years now that meets one of the major functional attributes of PTC. So that's important. So it's another way in which our system is currently safe, and we don't need PTC to serve that purpose. But anyway, we will look for opportunities to sort of depict in narrative format, what our current system looks like. The other thing I want to point out for this committee is that next month we will be bringing a procurement to the committee, which will be a change order for our contract with Bombardier to have them do PTC installations on the M3 fleet. They've done a very good job in terms of the installations on the M7 fleet, and we're looking for any opportunity that we can to try to speed things up in terms of the hardware installations. And this will free up our own forces to be able to concentrate on some other fleet installations. So every place that we can save a week or two, a month, whatever, at this point, any opportunities that we have to tighten the schedule, we think that's important. So that's a change order that you will be seeing that will be brought to the committee next month.
Any additional questions? Yes, Neil.
So I'll just throw out a couple of things. On the materials, I'd ask one in the calendar, which we're calling our summary schedule. I would ask that we find a way to carry over the PTC 1 through 4, which we state are the components of PTC.
Sure.
As to when those
Sure.
things will be done.
Mm-hmm.
And related to that, I'd like to carry over the language. Some places we call it PTC2, other places we call it civil speed enforcement. I realize these are all synonyms,
Sure.
I guess, but in your use of the synonyms, I think it just adds it adds unintentional complexity and translation error potentially on a bunch of laymen.
Sure.
Third, I'd ask that we have on a monthly basis actually say what has changed since last time from the plan.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I know you made a note somewhere, but it was sort of, you had to find out that the final design review was pushed out.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to have an understanding of what has changed in the plan since then.
Okay.
And then the last point, which I made in the room, which I think we'll get to later, is that and I say this for, I guess, I don't know if anyone from the Long Island's here, but I think the notion of having a almost entirely different report, almost nothing similar to it, is a little cognitive dissonance for those of us reading this, especially given the timeliness of this report. So I'd ask in some ways, of all the things we talk about with standardization, this is one area
Sure.
where I think there would be some real merit to that.
Any additional questions?
I'll throw out one more, which is one more last thing, sorry. We've done, I think, a very good job as an agency focusing on the subway action plan and a dashboard for the public. I'd like to figure out how we can distill down these materials into a single chart that we think is an appropriate dashboard for the public.
Okay.
I think that's going to be difficult to do, but it would certainly be worthwhile if we could take a glance and understand where we're at.
Yeah, we've been struggling with that, but we'll put our heads together and see if we can
so
come up with something.
complex.
Yeah.
I think one of the important things and the points made by both of my fellow committee members is that PTC isn't something you turn on and it's a different world. It's something that you work towards, and we've worked a long way towards it. Any other information items, in which case we go to procurements.
Good morning. There are no competitive procurements in this month's procurement package. There are 2 ratifications totaling $472,403. The first ratification is for Progress Rail in the amount of $310,485. This award recommendation is for the purchase of 200 axles for the MNR's coach and M3 fleets. This is being ratified because there is insufficient material inventory on hand to protect MNR service. The future purchase of these axles has been competitively solicited and is currently in the award process. The final ratification is an emergency procurement in the amount of $161,918 for substitute busing services, which was initiated to support the installation of new grade crossings in Mosaic Branch, the Harlem line, during the weekends of October 20th and the Port Jervis line on the weekend of October 27th. Both lines are on one-track territory, necessitating that the work be done on weekends when commuter traffic is lightest. Train service was discontinued from Wassaic Station to Southeast Station and Harriman Station to Port Jervis Station. A lapse of passenger service of these lines would have caused significant customer service impacts. May I please have a vote on these procurements presented?
I make a motion to recommend these procurements. Is there a second? Thank you. Discussion. Mr. Mordler.
Madam Chairman, both of these ratifications have good purpose, but both of them involve applications by entities that have been guilty, directly or indirectly, of violation of the antitrust laws, that have engaged in anti-competitive activities. And if you go through the books for each and every agency, you find that somewhere between a third and a half of all of the vendors have that kind of a problem. And so you have two countervailing considerations. One, we need them. They are what they are, and we need them to do the job. On the other hand, by giving them the contracts and the work, we do two things. One, we sort of look away from the problem and give some encouragement to the view it doesn't mean anything. It's just part of the cost of doing business. And number two, we run the risk of encountering it. To its credit, the Long Island Railroad has a ratification coming on, or a contract approval coming on today, for the designation of 3 integrity monitors. And that is an issue, integrity monitors, that we at the procurement working group have been functioning on and focusing on in some detail. And so what I would like to recommend to Metro North is that where you have a vendor who has an SIA at some point within, let's say, the last 4 or 5 years, that contract be subject to the appointment at the vendor's expense of an integrity monitor whose function it is to ensure that we do not have a repeat of the kind of conduct that, or misconduct, that caused the criminal proceedings. There are 3 very excellent names that have been put forth, including K2, by the Long Island Railroad. We can select from any one of those. That's your judgment to make. But I think it ought to be a matter of day-to-day actual course of conduct. You violate, that's part of the cost that you're going to have to do. And it will convey a message that we're serious about this. Because the message we have been conveying in the time that I've been on this board is we don't give a damn. And I think that's wrong.
You've clearly identified the conundrum that we face. Could you look into it?
Sure, we'll look into that.
Yes, Andrew.
I don't understand the community coach thing. It says the total cost for these emergency busing services is $161,000 and deemed fair and reasonable. It's 29% lower than the average established cost from Metro North's existing busing contract. How could we have this contract, which I know we have for emergency busing services? I assume we've had that in place, my recollection, for a long time. But here we go to a one-off contractor on an emergency basis, and it's 29% less than the large contract that we have that we bid out. That's first question. Second question is, why wasn't the contracted people available for emergency service? Isn't that what we contracted them for?
First, to your second point, we had gone through each and every one of the contractors, which we do have under contract, and they just did not have the availability to support this particular construction
But don't they have to under our contract? What does our contract say?
They do, but again, there was competing demands at that particular time, and the amount of time and the duration and the way this was going to be laid out, they couldn't support the type of service that was needed by us. So we had gone to each one and gone through their schedules and made sure that they didn't have availability, that we could have potentially used our existing contract.
But what's the point of having an existing contract? If we have an emergency, don't they have to contractually provide the service?
They're typically are available, but they are not required for these types of service. The service is set up for a service outage. This is for construction. That again, in fairness, we came at the existing contractors fairly late, which kind of exasperated the problem. But in the end of the day, they just weren't available to provide the service, and we didn't have the ability to compromise and not.
So
Al, wasn't the other issue that it was sort of prime leaf viewing season? That was my understanding. I mean, you'll see the dates of these outages.
Yeah, but if we have a contract and contractually, I don't remember these contracts, but I know we have these services contracted for. What's the point of having them if when you have a problem that you can't get them to perform? I mean, I don't understand it. I'd like to understand what that contract says. I'd like to understand who we have the contracts with. I don't know how long they have to go, but that's ridiculous, that if you have a problem that you can't count on them to perform the services, why bother with the contract?
No, your point's well taken, sir, and we are currently going out and re-soliciting for new bus service, and we are, in fact, looking at broadening the scope. This scope that's currently in the existing contract is for service outages for, like, if in fact we have an operational issue. The type of construction that this and the duration of it was not within the general scope of what most of the contractors had signed up for in their scope. That's why we had to go outside. They just weren't available for the longer duration.
I'd like to see that clause. I'd like to see that contract, because now we're presently going out to bid for these services. Is that what's happening?
Yes, over the next couple of months. And again, the bus procurements are not easy procurements to find people who are prepared and be able to provide these services when we need them. So,
but we had more than one contractor available, right?
That's true. Yes,
I'd like to see that whole thing. The other thing is, how could this guy, this one-off service, come in 29% less than our contracted amount?
Well, since I have to come back to you, I'll give you more specific detail, but what I suspect in what we have here is a case where the contractors who are on contract basically have their staff and their busing readily available to us, as compared to this was, as you state, a one-off, and we just had the availability.
I don't understand this. I really don't. I mean, if you have a contract, I'm not going to waste a lot of time with this thing, but if you have a contract and that's what it's there for a problem that occurs, and then you go one off and you got a price that's 29% less than the bulk contract you had, to me, I don't understand the thing.
Would you provide us with more detail, please?
Absolutely.
Mr. Mordler.
The procurement working group has been focusing primarily on the information available out of the transit agency as contrasted with the Long Island Railroad or Metro North. But one of the facts that has come out, and that should be borne in mind, is that most of the other authorities have a rule that if you do not comply, that is a factor in terms of giving them any future contract. Port Authority has issued regulations to that effect. State DOT has. Seems to me that is something you ought to give some serious consideration. If these folks cannot comply, if these folks, when they can't comply, bring to bear another contractor who not only does, but does it cheaper, that's a disqualifying factor. And I think you ought to make that a part of your standard operating procedure.
Yes, sir, it is part of our responsibility review. When we have contracts for up for award, we do look at past performance.
Any additional questions? Could I have a vote, please, on both of these? Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll move this on to the board.
The regular monthly reports on our operations, finances, ridership, and the capital program are in the book, and we're here to answer any questions that you might have.
Yes.
May I call your attention, please, to page 72? You will see there the additional standees on the Harlem line, on the New Haven line, are really quite staggering in terms of amount. 229 on Harlem during the past year, 306 on the New Haven, and it goes pretty much on and on. Why, and what are we doing about it?
Commissioner Myrtle, that's what I spoke to earlier, especially during the month of December when we had the car shortage due to the slip slide issues we had. So these standee numbers are directly in relationship to the decreased consensus compliance. And on a monthly basis, we operate approximately 20,000 trains. So what this kind of lets us know that on per line basis, when you see the number of 306, that's 306 total projected standees on the entire line. So the New Haven standee numbers are actually the highest of all three, and on a daily basis we operate 400 trains. So across those 400 trains we had 300 standees.
Yes, but in the month of December alone you had 306.
Correct. What these numbers are average daily standees. So during one day on the New Haven line where we operate 400 trains, across those 400 trains, there would have been 300 standees total.
Forgive me. It seems to me that when people pay a fare, they're entitled to a seat. And if we dismiss it by saying it's just 306 people getting the shaft, that doesn't...
We're not dismissing it, Commissioner Myrtler. On the New Haven side in particular, if you recall...
New Haven, I understand.
Yes.
But, it seems to me we need to focus on this across the board. It's just not fair.
We agree with you 110% on that.
Part of the reason, you'll recall, Commissioner Myrtler, that we had requested last year the purchase of the additional 60 M8 cars on the New Haven. And as we've recently advised the committee, there's also an option for an additional, 34? An additional 34 M8 cars. I mean, we're struggling on the New Haven with respect to being able to give a seat for all of our customers.
Kathy,
I guess
I couldn't agree more on the New Haven.
Yeah.
But it does seem to me that we need to have an attitudinal change to say this isn't something we just accept. New Haven, I understand. And I accept your statement, you don't just accept it, all right? But let's do something affirmative about it, please.
Okay. I would like to reiterate John's statement that we don't just accept it. We don't just accept it. It's obviously something that we're focused on because, as you say, our customers are paying good money for a good experience, and when they don't have that experience, it's concerning to all of us. So we are certainly focused on that.
Are there any other issues to be brought before the committee? In which case, thanks to the committee and thank you to everyone who has supported us. Motion to adjourn. Second. Those in favor.